you even decide what it is that you want to make. So the work is the central idea, just in my mind, in any organization that's considering change. So the work. The first precept that I begin with is what we're making now is markedly different than it was 18 months ago. I mean, and that's a pretty significant thing to consider. Duncan Watts, who's a researcher over at Yahoo, introduced this idea that I think is very important, and it's this kind of metaphor of beginning a lot of individual fires with the intention of creating kind of a blaze. And when you think back at advertising just over the past kind of 25 years, the goal has been to create that kind of iconic anthemic message that people just kind of remember and becomes part of culture and what people kind of think of. But now, with all of this media fragmentation and people other terms that people throw around quite a bit, it's becoming more difficult to have that same effect within this environment. So just the idea of starting more fires, to create kind of a cultural movement, I think is worthy. And also, when you look at the cost efficiencies of digital media, creating more objects, there's a cost benefit to that as well, because they tend to be less expensive, and a lot of them don't require kind of media support to put in market. So again, kind of metaphorically, it's shifting the idea from this kind of roulette model, where you're kind of betting it all on a couple of 30-second spots or a big anthemic 60, which still works from time to time, but I think you can't argue with the belief that it works less frequently than it did maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And now shifting into something that feels more like a mutual fund, where you're putting together kind of a portfolio of work. Some of the stuff won't work, some of the stuff will succeed, but overall the risk is being kind of offset by kind of the diversity of work that you're putting into market. So just less about kind of 1984, and now just kind of looking at this more varied landscape of work. And I just grabbed a few examples of different things we're probably all familiar with. And these span a very kind of large continuum of just of complexity and innovation. Edward mentioned the Instaprint, the Instagram kind of printer that speaking with the guys from Breakfast, they put this thing together in a couple of weeks. I mean, just using APIs and existing technologies, but just a brilliant idea that smart people assembled very quickly. And you contrast that with something like kind of Nike Plus or the Fiat EcoDrive, these platforms that are much more complex, require great lead times to develop. I mean, just there's a lot of diversity kind of in the work that's reflected there. It's not just kind of creating the same object or using the same team to create it. It's very varied, and just you have other things kind of social media engagement that kind of run beneath it, but just instead of having kind of a campaign that's dominated by kind of print and television, we're all now dealing with a very broad array of evolving assets that we can use to tell stories or connect with people. And we see that there's value in doing that. So, thinking about the way that we used to buy media, or that we continue to buy media, just and run ads through that media, you have these kind of cycles where you're heavy in market, and then just you kind of drop out of market, and kind of you get ready for your next big sales spike. And using listening tools Radian6, I mean, you can start to look at kind of the amount of conversation volume that's happening in social media, sentiment around brands, with that conversation. What you start to see is when you're in market and you're heavy up and you're spending a lot of money on TV, or just you've got some events in market, people recognize it and people talk about it. But when you go dark, it drops off real quick, and just public awareness just goes away very quickly. But when you look at a more distributed cycle, just where you're putting more objects into market, and it can be a combination of kind of things that are more filmic and things that are more social, mobile, a variety of the things that were shown. You're increasing that frequency distribution, and you're putting more things out there for more people to comment and talk about. And just what you find with these social discussions is, it's the impressions, as people talk about your brand, just kind of reach broader numbers of people. So it's not these kind of incredibly isolated two people sitting in a bar talking about something. They're happening on forums, or they're happening on Facebook, and these discussions are being seen by large numbers of people, and just like value is now being ascribed to those social impressions, because the other great thing about social impressions is they're looked at like kind of very credibly. Like advertising, like, you know, sometimes like there's a credibility issue to it where, you know, like people don't believe it as much because like it's a company broadcasting a message about itself. But like with like social impressions, like it's an unbiased opinion, just like of a person that's not being paid, like kind of registering their thoughts on something, and it's like, you know, carries a lot more kind of like weight and influence in helping people inform opinions about a brand or a service. The other thing, like along with like the variety of work, is just like the work is becoming more complex, and just like that's not to say that like kind of print work or broadcast work isn't complex. It's to say that like as an industry we've had a lot more experience like kind of working with it, and the processes through which we make it, like we've refined over time, and we've gotten quite good at it. Like with interactive, I mean, things are changing all the time. I mean, just like the tools that we're using to build things now, like are different than what we were using 24 months ago. I mean, you're in this continuous learning cycle, behavior's changing. So, you know, as we start to build some things, like last year, we like kind of worked on a website for BDW. It's not kind of, it follows a different process just from how you might handle a TV script or just like a print ad. Like digital work tends to be the outcome of a lot of very small decisions that like kind of aggregate into a single idea. And there's a lot of like kind of complexity, and there's like this is going to be covered by Tim and some other people. There's a lot of iteration, just like where you kind of like, you know, work on the product and it evolves like kind of over time. But if you start to think about just like that complexity and all of these decisions and how that like kind of lays into a traditional agency's like kind of organizational structure, I find that it doesn't like you know, fit particularly well. I mean, you know, this kind of pyramid idea that like kind of like still looks very much like the way a lot of traditional agencies are structured. You've got you know, like senior account people and senior creatives, like you know, client people at the top, just like, you know, mid-level leadership just above it, and then kind of project teams below. Just like, you know, work going up and down, just that pyramid, if it's a script or if it's a print ad or if it's something that an organization has a lot of like muscle memory and understanding like how that work moves up and down, yeah, you can get pretty good at it. But if things are changing every day and the context like gets pretty esoteric, it takes a long time like just to explain a complex idea, just like up 2 levels. And you begin to collect like a lot of feedback that isn't necessarily like valuable or informed, that comes back down like just into the group that's attempting to make things. Just like so, the complexity just of some of these software builds, I look at as being like almost wholly incompatible, just like with the organizational structures that most agencies use to attempt to build this work. And I'll talk more about this in a second, but just like you know, this is kind of one of the leading obstacles, like in many agencies, like kind of you know, making the step from creating like kind of simple work like banners and microsites and things that feel like ads into creating things like Edward had been talking about, or some of the examples that I'd shown that require more knowledge, more like more expertise, and just like kind of more autonomy within groups that can work to create that. So, you know, if you look at the work being different, then just like the next logical like conclusion to accept is that you're going to need different people doing that work. It doesn't have to be a complete like kind of reshuffling of the group, but you can't just expect that the same people are going to suddenly like kind of turn their heels and create something that's markedly different than they've been creating for the last you know, like 5 or 10 years. You know, there's another like kind of like, you know, wrinkle to this as well. I mean, just like, you know, the work's different, it requires different teams, but also, I mean, just you know, like since the recession came in, the involvement in procurement groups, like in creating contracts, has become like kind of much more pronounced. And just as agencies, just like you know, the margins are shrinking, and whereas like, you know, maybe 5 years ago, like when you think about just like introducing new work, like you can start to slide in new people on the periphery of a team that has margins that can support it. But now, just as the contracts become leaner, you know, agencies are being forced to make choices just about like who's provisioned for within a retainer, and just like kind of who you take out. And just those decisions are ultimately, like in my belief, like going to like dictate the outcome of what you produce. So yeah, like simple fact, I mean, just like if you believe that just like the teams and the structures that have been in place, like you ask them suddenly to create like a complex mobile application or a platform idea or some like kind of sophisticated social media strategy, it's not going to happen. I mean, just like you need different people that are more skilled in this work that are going to be able to define like kind of these outcomes. And one of the things that we experimented with a lot at my last agency, and we're beginning to tinker with at the agency that I'm working at now, is like the effect that the composition of the team has, like kind of on the outcome of the work. And again, like I mean, just like some of these things are hopefully like subjects that we can discuss, and this becomes less of a presentation, more of like a discussion around like kind of what we think about this, or just like other people that have worked with it, or if people think this is crap, like which is like completely reasonable, and hopefully we'll hear some of that. But like historically, and like some of the teams that I've inherited, like have been kind of structured like in this blue diagram in the left, like where when we started thinking about just like how to set up the team, like the reflex was to like kind of mirror the client organization, and this just deals with the account like group. It's not like kind of considering creative or other like kind of disciplines on the side, or else the chart becomes pretty unwieldy. But like these terms like, hey, we're going to become the extension of the client's marketing group. Like, I mean, all like kind of very noble, very worthy like kind of ideas. But just like what happens in that model is just like most of the work is weighted towards like kind of like management and relationship building, and just like below the line, like the people that are having less contact with the client, just like there's a very small number of people that have the ability to actually generate objects or work. And what we started playing around with, just like in the second figure, is reshuffling like those teams. So beginning to either convert like some account people that had like the technical ability and the organizational skills to be able to manage the creation of work, and bringing in producers of all different varieties, but like kind of like shifting out some of those people and reinvesting those like kind of positions in like people that are responsible for the act of creating work. And what we found, like in a couple of the client engagements that we put this in place in, the work changed immediately. Like this wasn't like kind of a 6-month plan. Like it changed in like kind of in weeks. Immediately the ideas were different. Like the people that were producing the work were now working directly with the clients, and just like became more effective advocates for the work because they understood it a little bit better. But it was not like kind of this long-term like shift. Like we like kind of very quickly began to yield like very different work. There's bumps. Like there's a lot of reasons not to consider this. Like some people aren't as skilled in handling client relationships. There was a lot of bumpiness, but just like in our like from our point of view, like we took the position that, hey, we're going to get better at making things, and we'll deal with the consequences of like taking a hit on the service side if we can make things that are much better. The client relationship will will flourish if we can make them happy with the things that we create. So yeah, just like kind of an interesting like kind of thing that we continue to tinker with and play with on engagements where it makes sense. Any thoughts on that, or has anyone tried like something similar, or does this look like complete bullshit? Like nothing. Yes.
Did you tell your client we're going to come in with people that are not client savvy and sort of prep them for that, or how did you go about that?
We did, yeah. So like one of them was an existing relationship, and one of them was a new relationship. And with the existing relationship, we pre-sold it. We said, here's the team. We're going to shuffle it up a little bit. We still had like kind of like leadership at the account level. But it was more about like kind of creating an environment like through which the work could be sold. And the way that this reported was, I mean, just like the producers still came up like through the account leadership. It was kind of a matrix like reporting structure. So this person still has like control over directing the work, but like now you're kind of dealing with like kind of defining projects. The projects get distributed to different teams, and the teams are responsible for building them. Yeah, there was some bumpiness, like, but by and large, I mean, a limited sample size, so I can't say that this is some like kind of publishable like study, but but like the work did change, and the client relationships weren't adversely affected.